I can't stop getting this image of you and Beatrice just doing acid, fairly gnawing on an ear.
That's what I'm trying to be, honestly. At this point in my life, I think that's what I am trying to achieve as a woman. As a creature.
And welcome back to Fresh Wounds, your monthly Patreon exclusive episode where we talk about various films. And right now we're doing New French Extremity. I'm Terry.
I'm Mary Beth, and I'm so excited because this week we are going back to a little bit more kind of mainstreamy New French Extremity with the 2007 film Inside, directed by Julianne Maury and Alexandre Bustillo. Sorry if I pronounced them wrong. This is a trio that also directed The Deep House, which was the underwater found footage movie duo. This is what happens when we record on the weekends. But this is the directing duo behind films like The Deep House, which was the found footage underwater movie. They also did, I believe, was it the prequel for Leatherface? Yeah. They did the 2017 Leatherface film as well. And Candisha from 2020. So they are a lovely, disgusting directing duo of weirdos.
They also did a movie called Among the Living, which I remember trying to watch once and not enjoying. And then they also did a segment on ABCs of Death too.
Yes, and they also this is I have not watched this yet, but their 2011 film Livid or The Vide, which is on Shudder, is friend of the show Josh Korngut's like all-time favorite movie, and I really want to watch it. It's supposed to be really, really good. So I think it's like a vampire-esque movie. So I wanted to watch it before this episode, didn't have time, but check that out on Shudder because also. This is not sponsored, though Shudder should give us money. A lot of these films are streaming on Shudder under their New French Extremity collection, so if you have not watched any of them, go check that out if you are a Shudder subscriber. It's hard to find a lot of these films. Inside's is on Tubi. I know Tubi's owned by Fox. Someone lectured me about this on Twitter, about Tubi being owned by Fox, but like, I could watch it for free without having to go anywhere illegally, so that's where I watched this. Sorry, guys. I also, I own it on Blu-ray, but just sometimes it's so much easier on my computer to just watch it on Tubi while I'm, like, doing other stuff. But anyway, that is not related to this movie.
And I think Livid was hard to find here in the States for a while. It
was almost impossible. That's what Josh was telling me, that, like, it's not a movie that was readily accessible. Like, for some reason, he saw it at either an event or something, but it's really hard to find. Mm-hmm. And so it being on Shudder is, like, another example of Shudder bringing us access to things we wouldn't have.
It's like when Possession
otherwise access to
joined. You know, it's like a movie that's not readily available here. That like is
now it is because everyone is now a Possession girly, which I love. Good for Possession. I wonder how the director feels about that. That all of the weirdo gays and girlies have made it their personality. I would feel good about it personally, but you know, that's just me. But this is Inside, the original Inside from 2007. I'm so excited to talk about this movie because I'm going to make a bold statement. After rewatching this for only the second time, actually in my life, I think this actually might be one of my favorite movies.
Okay.
Say what you will about me, but I'll talk more about why I thought that watching it, but I'm so glad we rewatched this movie because I really think there's so much really interesting stuff going on so many different levels in this movie.
Yeah,
yes, so.
I agree. And the thing is, this is also my only second time I've ever watched this movie. I remember watching it once, and I cannot remember when it was, but it was at some point where I still had Letterboxd, because this is the second time, this was a rewatch on Letterboxd when I tried to add it, and I had rated it 3.5.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
On this watch, I bumped that up to a 4.5.
Oh, okay, cool. So we had a very similar journey.
Yes, I really enjoyed this watch. I think there's some issues keeping it from being like a perfect 5 that we'll talk about, but this is a really good movie.
God, it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
It's so much better. So I first saw this, I'm just going to start talking about when I first saw it before we kind of jump into like, but so I also first saw this movie in my college class where I saw High Tension.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
When I've talked about when I talk about that college class, like this teacher loved France and loved New French Extremity. So like he really is like a pillar in my horror education / like horror development.
I think that's
in terms
so cool.
of being like, right though, like I'm so lucky that I went to a fucking 2,000 person liberal arts school in middle of nowhere, like rural Southern Maryland. And I had this professor. And so like, I was super, super lucky to have, you know, access to him throughout him and his wife, my entire college career were like these incredible, like, you know, rumors that he was gay and she was lesbian and it was a marriage of convenience and all this stuff. But like no one cared because they were always together, chain smoking cigarettes. They dressed like they were still at Berkeley because they met when they were going to Berkeley. Like he was an equus when he was young. So there's photos of him posing nude with a horse when he was super young. And like, it's just like these people were like hugely influential in just like who I am as a person. So he showed us Inside as our last movie of the semester. It was either this or Cannibal Holocaust, and he decided to show us Inside. And I love that because he was like, oh, students get weird about Cannibal Holocaust because there's actual animal death and people have gotten mad at me. So we're going to show Inside instead. And I was like, good old college campuses. So we watched it and I was fucked. I was like, that is the most fucked up movie I've ever seen. So funny how times have changed about a decade. It's actually been about a decade. It's been about a decade since I first watched that because it was my sophomore year. And yeah, it was about a decade since I've watched it, almost to the day, I think, which is very funny, or like the month. But I watched it. I loved it. And it was another one of those pivotal, like, I am excited to watch more really fucked up movies. But at that time, I was not a big gore girly. I hadn't really started like wandering into that universe. So this was like so gross to me. And then watching it this time, I was like, it's so funny how this is like not tame by any means, but like I've seen so much worse that I'm watching it. And I'm like, I can finally see the beauty in this movie a lot more than I did when I was 19 in college. Still obsessed with it, but like shocked more than anything. And now watching it, I can really regard it as such a thing of like feral female beauty. And I'm so excited to talk about it again.
Yeah, so when this movie came out here in the States, it was under the Dimension Extreme label.
Oh boy. Oh man, do you remember that?
Oh, I do, because I stayed away from them.
Okay.
Because, and I'm going to share with you, Mary Beth, in the chat, this image of what the Dimension Extreme cover for this looked like. And so it's this cover, listeners, of like a woman holding her belly. You can't even tell it's really a woman. Looking at it now, like more in depth, I can see the baby's face in it. But like when I was looking at this, all I saw was scissors and someone's belly and hands and blood. Dimension Extreme, unrated. Like it's selling a specific kind of subset of direct-to-DVD movies that I thought was just... I did not know that this was a French film. There's no indication on this front cover that this is a new French extremity. There's no indication that this is anything other than a direct-to-DVD crappy movie, is what I thought.
Yeah.
And so I stayed away from it for so many years because I was like, that cover is giving me like, we're trying to be edgy hostile. Like that's what that cover is kind of giving me. And I was like, I don't think I want to watch any of this kind of movies. So I stayed away from it for a very, very long time. And it was only until, I don't know, it might have been 2018. I don't remember when I finally sat down to watch it, but it was after I learned more about New French Extremity, and I had seen Martyrs, but I'd seen High Tension, I'd seen all these movies.
Sorry.
And I was like,
I just love how much you don't like Martyrs. I respect it so much. Because our tastes align so much. So when you really don't like something, it just is so funny to me in a good way. Because it's just like, I love it when we just have a little bit of I don't know. I love it. Yeah. Anyway.
Me too. But yeah, so then I sat down and I was like, oh, this movie that had this horrible cover from Dimension Extreme, which I thought literally, whenever a label has like an offshoot label, it's typically used for like direct-to-DVD shit. And so I never gave it its due. And then I watched it and I remember thinking, oh, this is actually pretty good. And then, now fast forward to last night, and I think this movie is damn near a masterpiece.
I 100% agree. And I think like this happened to a lot of movies, like that kind of label, like the Dimension Extreme, the After Dark, because like Mungo was like one of like the After Dark thing. There's the Tartan Asian Extreme brand. That's a little bit more niche, but like that has like Old Boy and like these labels that are putting out these international movies that are more extreme. But it's funny because I feel like they get looped in with these movies that are like true straight to DVD schlock that are not good. But because especially in like 2000, like in the 2000s, I this is me speaking from my own experience. Like it was not a thing to watch a lot of international horror. And I know I was younger, but like it was harder to, we did not have access like we do now. And so when it's lumped in with those like labels, you're like, oh, it's one of those. But there's so many examples of those movies that like stuck out, but they got kind of lumped in with those labels.
Yeah.
And now
it's the same thing with, like, you mentioned, like, Mungo, and it's the same thing with that movie, where it's like I never watched it because it was like these, 8 films to die for, or After Dark, or whatever those different labels were. And it felt, they looked cheap. Like, the way it was, it looked like, well, this is something that isn't the movies that are hitting the movie theater. These are direct to DVD type of stuff. Now I can see the importance of a lot of direct to VOD is what basically it is now. But like back then, I had grown up at this time frame where if a movie was direct to VHS, it was a shit movie. Like we're talking we're talking like Jack Frost, which has some merits to it, but is a gross movie. We're talking like, Ginger Dead Man. We're talking about all of these like Full Moon-esque things that were just like, we're trying to make a quick buck, or it was movies that were trying to ape on other films. Like it was like a Jurassic Park came out, and so they would try to release some kind of prehistoric park or something like that, right? So they'd release all these movies to try to capitalize on dumb people going to the rental store and Jurassic Park is out and seeing this going, oh, this must be it, and grabbing it. Like that was the kind of market that it was going. And so when we got into the early 2000s, I thought that had kind of continued. And so I stayed far away from most of these direct to DVD, direct to movies.
Well, and it did too, a little bit. Like it did, like in Blockbuster, there were still those DVDs that were like, oh God, like it was like not the dentist. I can't even remember the names of some of the ones that were there, but like I'm looking at some of the Dimension Extreme. Like I couldn't remember like what was part of Dimension Extreme, and like Eden Lake was Dimension Extreme, which is you haven't seen that one? Okay, Teeth, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. Teeth was in there. Rogue, which is the giant crocodile movie from Australia, and then there's Black Sheep, Diary of the Dead, which I actually really liked for what it found footage George A. Romero movie about zombies. Surprisingly, I have not watched it since I was in high school. So this is me saying I liked it in high school without revisiting it. Also one of the Hellraiser movies, Feast 2. So again, like there's some really good stuff in there, but it's hidden amongst like Feast 2 and 3 and another Children of the Corn movie and the third Pulse movie. So like, yeah, those are really popular now, but when you're looking at like the 30-so movies that they put out, like how do you determine which ones are worth watching and which ones aren't? And you didn't for a while.
When you put them all together like that, you're going to assume that that's the quality. So when you see something like this is the millionth edition of Children of the Corn, or it's a sequel to a movie that like Feast 2, which don't get me wrong, I love Feast. I haven't seen it in a very long time. I don't know if it holds up.
I have never seen Feast. So.
It's really weird and gnarly and gross, but
hell yeah, love that.
But like if that's the kind of quality that you were lumping in with like Inside, and also you're releasing Inside 2 years after Hostel came out, and you're trying to like make something that looks almost torture porny, it just I stayed away from it.
Well, it's even more torture porny than actual US torture porn, but we talked about that in the first episode, everybody. If you did not listen to our High Tension Fresh Wounds, go listen to that, where I talk a lot about the origins and connections between those. We will not go into that again here because I already talked way too long about that. So let's just like dive into Inside, which is like something I love, and I love New French Extremity, as we know, but something in watching them kind of more back to back than I have in a while is how fucking lean and mean these movies are, because this is an hour and 22 minutes long. High Tension is pretty short. Fat Girl's a little bit longer, but that's also like, that one's a little bit of an outlier in terms of like, but these like more kind of,
it's like back to basics.
Typical, like more typical examples of New French Extremity are, they know how to give you characters to care about, because I will say, like, both High Tension and Inside do a really good job about, like, setting up characters with enough information that you care about them, but not too much as to, like, over encumber the plot.
Yep.
And then immediately get into the violence. I mean, in both Inside and in High Tension, again, within 20 minutes, we've got the villain introduced and the terror starting. And then it's nonstop for an hour. And like you said, it's a back to basics, like, following a slasher model, but even better in terms of, like, distilling it down to its meanest parts and taking those mean parts and amplifying them to a degree that we haven't really seen and been exposed to, at least in this era. And I just fucking love that. Like, these directors really get the core of what makes those movies scary and really, like, dig into that and make it incredible. And I think, and now that I've been watching these, like, and thinking about them a lot, I think that's one of the reasons why I love them so much. Is they understand what is so scary and don't try to make it any more than it has to be, which a lot of directors could learn in this day and age.
Absolutely. This is a mostly, and I say mostly because we'll get to the parts where I do think it could be a little bit shorter. And it's
interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So but I will say that that's honestly why on my rewatch I rated it as a 4.5 instead of a complete 5, because there are some areas in here that I do think could be kind of, well, let's use some scissors and cut it out.
Yeah, there's one thing I think can be cut out, which is one of the only reasons I did not give it a full 5. But we will also get to that.
But I do like that this has distilled. You mentioned the slasher, which absolutely, this is a slasher film through and through. It's a single location for pretty much the entirety of the movie. It's also a home invasion movie. Like, it is taking all of these, like, tropes or genre conventions that we're seeing in this time frame. I mean, this movie beat The Strangers by a year coming out. So, like,
yeah.
So we have, like, this perfectly distilled home invasion movie that is not about a person being stuck outside the house for most of the movie, but is actually inside the house, which I think is interesting in and of itself. It's a slasher, and I think this movie is like a perfect distillation of a bunch of different kinds of movies together with a small cast, and it just is so effective in what it wants to do. And it's terrifying. It really is intense. But
yeah. So I want to actually read something from, this is like the seminal text for the series, which is The Films of the New French Extremity, Visceral Horror and National Identity by Alexandra West. And she has a chapter on Inside, and there's a quote that she has in this chapter from Alexandre Bossio talking about the inspiration for the film, but then also about playing with slasher tropes. So I want to just read that now before we kind of jump in to kind of establish what their minds were at, because this is their directorial debut as a duo. And so he says, "A friend of mine was pregnant, and I asked myself what a pregnant woman alone at home at night would feel like. It certainly must be a weird feeling. My first idea was to have a struggle between the pregnant woman and a serial killer who hunted her to eat her placenta, but it was too basic, like every slasher movie with a fucking bad guy on one side and a poor innocent girl on the other. Changing the sex of the boogeyman was more interesting, more original, and a real struggle for life." So I love that, because I do really think there's something really awesome about having this Beatrice Dalle, who we will talk about, queen of weird French shit, being the villain. Because again, this is pretty, I mean, you know, we can draw comparisons to like Pamela Voorhees and some of the monstrous mothers we've seen in horror history, but like having such a vicious woman in this movie, I think is so important, because I think also like in Hostel, in Saw, in a lot of these torture porn movies of the 2000s in the US, it was all men doing bad things to other people or women. And so I think having, and I think having this inversion is really important for a lot of reasons, but I also think follows also on trend with a lot of things in New French Extremity of using women. And there's a lot of things I actually was thinking about with this film, which we'll get into, about how these movies use women. And we'll go back deeper into that, because I think that there's definitely arguments to be made about like tinges of misogyny and like treating women like shit, like in Martyrs and in all of these movies, women are being like ripped to shreds. But I think there is also a nugget of something even more fascinating than just like blatant, like just talking about misogyny, but in terms of letting women access feral emotions and these feelings that women are so kept away from in horror. And these movies aren't afraid to let women tap into those like feral, violent, twisted sides that men are so often given access to in movies. And this is a movie I think that really gives both women access to a feral, violent side that I think is really fucking cool.
Well, I also think that the change from having, like, I did not know that, because you said that the original idea was a man that wants to eat placenta. Is that?
Yes, the original idea was like a serial killer who just wants placenta.
Which, gnarly. That and
that's definitely gross.
That's definitely gross.
I'd watch that.
Oh, I would
but
too.
I do like this, like this better than that.
I do too, because I think that this movie sidesteps one of the. I think you can take a look at this as through a lens of, is this misogynistic or not, because of the way that things unfold. However, I will say that I think it sidesteps some of the issues that I had with Martyrs, because it is two women that are literally going at each other, as opposed to a man that is literally just. Both women in this movie have agency. Both of these women are fighting for their lives, and it's not just like someone is in there just beating the shit out of them constantly. And so I do think that this sidesteps some of the issues that I had personally with like Martyrs or that type of film, because it is two women that are just going absolutely feral on each other, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And like, all right, well, let's just dive into it, because there's like a million things I can say here, and it'll just make more sense for us to just go through and talk about it, I think, now. And then just one last thing I want to, before we jump in, I'm already contradicting myself, is the political context of this movie that I want to establish super quick.
Yes.
Because that actually is a very important backdrop for this movie, because as, again, from the first episode, talked about how there was a lot of political turmoil in France at this time, both like reflecting upon what happened in the US on 9/11, 2001, to their own kind of politically corrupt, insane environment. This takes place with the backdrop of these riots that were happening, which started in 2005 about immigration. There is a lot of issues with racial tension, specifically with North African immigrants to France. And these riots had a lot to do with immigration policies. There were a lot of deaths. And a lot of these basically the riots were about immigration policies, and conservative immigration policies in France to keep the bad people, and I put that in scare quotes because they are not bad people, out. And this movie plays both with so our protagonist, Sarah, is a photojournalist who is photographing these riots. At one point, we'll talk about it, there's a young boy in the backseat of a cop car who was a Muslim boy, because a lot of these immigrants are Muslim. And there's also, I'll talk about kind of comparisons made with the woman in black, who is our villain, and the black otherness being kind of in parallel with otherness and people being upset about people of color coming into the country of France.
Yeah, and the French riots of 2005, it was kind of the triggering event was there were three teenagers who were being chased by the police, and they hid in a power substation, and two of the boys, Zayed Benna and I don't know how to pronounce this kid's name, Bouna Traore, got electrocuted because they're in the power station, and they were electrocuted. A third boy suffered electric shock injury from the power station they were hiding in, which caused blackouts in this area, and then their deaths and the blackouts led to a bunch of protests where we're talking 25,000 rioters, 11,000 police officers. We're talking 2,888 arrested, an unknown amount were injured, 126 police officers and firemen were injured, 2 civilians were killed from the riots, 1 was killed from smoke inhalation. So we're talking about this big riot that just sort of unfolded because of immigration, because of class issues, because they were kept in basically a ghettoized place, and they were not given any chances of breaking out of being in this poor community. And a lot of them that were coming in here were from rural areas, and so you have this idea of they're basically keeping them in these different places that were not giving them any opportunities to succeed, and they were not educated, so they were not able to move out of this area of being subjugated. And so we have a lot of unrest that is unfolding in 2005, 2 years before this movie comes out. And this movie is kind of set in a if not this particular riot, is set in a very similar type of riot. Like, it's obviously influenced by the unrest that was happening in France 2 years prior.
Yeah, and then another quote from Alexander Westbrook from Bastillo about the occlusion of the riots. The real life shots of the riots were very important to us because they're the only real violent images in the movie. We hate Sarkozy, who in 2005 was Minister of the Interior, but then served as President of France from 2007 to 2012. We hate Sarkozy and his politics. He's very conservative. I live in a suburb, one of the biggest in Europe, and when I hear the president insult people who live here, I shake with anger. But that's not the theme of Inside. Neoconservative politics have been here for more than 15 years. Sarkozy is not a newbie. Chirac was here before him, who was the previous president in 2005 during these riots. So basically, they wanted to include like the neoconservative politics and like the very violent kind of background, because I think you see that in this film. It's on Christmas. Streets are very quiet, not just because it's Christmas, but because people are hiding away from the riots, from the violence. Sarah's boss at the beginning is saying, I wish you could go photograph the protest, but oh damn, you're having your baby tomorrow. Like, sorry, you can't go. So while they're not like thematically a big part of it, it is a very important backdrop of violence, of like this real world violence going on versus this interior, very personal violence and the tension between those two. So if you watch this movie and are like, what's going on with these riots? They are steeped in actual French history. So yeah. So with that, all of that context, let's start talking about the nitty gritty parts of Inside, starting with a horrendous car accident that really just sets us off to a very lovely, bloody, disgusting start that everything is just going to be A-okay.
I love that the first shot of this is we're in the womb with the baby and we're hearing muffled talk of the mother talking about how finally inside me. There we go. We get the title, like the first line in the movie. No one can take him. No one can hurt him now. And then the baby slams against the screen because we have had an accident and we are now outside, away from the kind of dodgy CGI baby. That's what I really look. I get it's 2007, but this CGI baby that pops up throughout, I'm like, it's not good.
That to me is something that really bothered me. Where I'm like, stop trying. Like, I care more about the women outside. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, look, I'm not a big kid person. I don't really like. I understand why they're cutting to it and like hurt whatever, but I just was like, we could have really avoided these moments, and I don't think it would have affected the tone / effectiveness of this movie. But
no, I agree. I do think it kind of I think it kind of heightens the stakes for a particular kind of person. Like
for sure,
I'm not all about the pregnancy stuff. So it doesn't really bother me. Like, I say that and it sounds really callous. You don't care the baby's getting tossed around in the womb, but like it's there to, like, I think showcase the fact that not only is she fighting for herself, but she could also be potentially fighting for the baby, although I will disagree with that remark later on.
I was going to say, there's a lot of arguments we could be taught where we'll talk
Absolutely.
about that.
But like, yeah. I do think for, like, the viewer, you have this... okay. I'm going to save this, put a pin in this, and let's talk about this a little bit later, because I have a lot of things to say about that. But once we're outside and we've seen like the aftermath of the car accident, and there's one little detail in this that I absolutely love, and it's downpouring outside, and we're panning to the car, and you see the windshield is pretty much gone, except for like there's like a portion of it, but it's mostly gone, and that windshield wiper is still going, and it's just sort of flapping on the wind.
Yeah.
And it's such a small little detail, but it fits so much. It's like it's just this tension to these small little details that add something. Like, that is something that will stick in my mind for a while now, because it's just this lonely windshield wiper trying to do its job, and there's no windshield for it to wipe, and it's such a cool visual image.
Yeah, and also, like, they take their time with this opening. There's, like, we've seen so many car accident opening scenes. Like, you know, we just finished watching Final Destination. Like, we're so used to them being, like, very fast-paced, quick cut. But here, we just have the aftermath, and they take their time with Sarah, our main character who's pregnant, waking up and seeing her husband. They don't, like, have this, like, quick revelation. It really makes it such a part of the movie rather than just like okay, context, bye. But like, you really get to kind of feel her grief and how new the grief is. Because, like, she's very visibly pregnant in this opening. And so that, like, she's already far along. So the death of her husband does not come very early before the rest of the events of the movie when she's finally about to give birth. So we are really getting put in this headspace of the grief of what is going on, of her trying to process what has happened to her and her baby. And she then has to have it. And we'll talk about the trauma of all of that. Like, without the woman coming, like, the trauma of losing your husband, getting into a car accident, and having to have a baby on Christmas by yourself. Like, all of it is just so fucking sad and traumatic, like, in and of itself. Like, already setting us off in this grief bomb, like, this sad trauma bomb of, like, ain't nothing good happening to this lady kind of situation.
Well, and this opening scene, the other thing that really stuck with me on this watch is how authentic it feels, where she's obviously unconscious, and she's starting to, like, wake up. She's dazed. She doesn't know what's happening. She's asking for her husband. I've been in a car accident once, and I remember how dazed I was afterwards, because there's, like, you have nothing is nothing as serious as this, but my airbags did deploy, and so there was a lot of smoke in my car from the airbags, and I did not know if the car was on fire, and there was, like, this whole confusion of, like, what is happening? Where am I? I think I had, like, lost consciousness for, like, a brief second. And I'm just like, I don't know what is happening. And my car is filling up with smoke. And there's that kind of dazed response that we get from her, where it's not really sinking in until she's able to finally look at her husband and see that dude is pouring blood from his mouth. He is not going to be waking up.
And then we get the pan up, and we get the color. We get the amazing white car versus black car, kind of foreshadowing, you know, everyone's favorite use of color dynamics in horror. But again, like, these details, like you said, like, we're already establishing kind of tone, vibe, use of color so quickly. And especially with the score, which in this whole movie, like, I didn't remember how much work that this score does for this movie, because there is not a lot of dialogue in this movie, especially when we get to just Sarah and the woman. This score is doing fucking work in this movie, and it is so good. And please pay attention to it when you're watching it, if you're watching this again, because it deserves an award for, like, the work that this score is doing to really, like, add the emotion that we don't have with dialogue throughout.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the score is doing a lot of work, and so is the cinematography. The DP in this is Laurent Barres. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. But this movie, we're already, like, this is their first movie, as you said. They've done a couple shorts beforehand, and this feels assured. The cinematography is so tight, and it's doing some really interesting things. Like the shot you mentioned, where the camera is literally pulling up on the two cars and descending into heaven, as if, like, the spirit is leaving the body almost. And it's such an awesome shot. It's such a fantastic opening that just gives you enough. You don't need to know anything else.
And I have another quote, actually, about the cinematography and the cinematographer. Cool. One more time. Another quote from me, from Maury this time, where talking about the aesthetic of the film and how the DP helped the aesthetics. So since the beginning, we decided to do a good-looking movie. Well, yes.
Succeeded.
We always wanted to show the worst thing you can imagine, but in the best way possible. We didn't want to use shaky cam, and we always wanted a structured way to direct. The use of light was really important to us, and the work with the director of photography began really early in the film process. We had discussions with Laurent Barre, our director of photography. He had just finished Frontiers, which is another new Frontier Comedy film. We wanted to begin the movie in a really realistic way and have an image that looks like a cold, rainy day in winter. We wanted to reflect the mind of Sarah. She's depressed, but she doesn't have the strength to cry. She's totally destroyed on the inside. So we wanted to begin in a very realistic way and then step by step go to fantastic imagery. And by the end, we wanted the movie to look like a dark fairy tale.
Ooh, I am so glad you say that, because I have some thoughts about that when we get a little bit later.
Yeah, so they really did, like, everything seems very calculated in how they were, like, this, at least from the aesthetic. And I love that. Like, they really had a vision and thought process about how we are traveling through not only Sarah's mind, but just through like the traumatic events and what that looks like as we continue. And so, yeah.
And so we get into the credits, and I love a good credit sequence. And this
a good credit sequence.
This one is unique because we have white lettering that is dripping, and it looks like it looks seminal. It looks like we're mixing like sex and violence almost, because it's like the letters are dripping in this whiteness, and then the images behind it are just like there's like a baby coming in and out of what looks like meat. Like it's hard to really understand what is happening. Like maybe it's like it moving around in the internal organs. It is red. It is goopy. It is thick blood that is like ultrasounds of baby faces as well. And the titling, the credit letters until we get to the title, which is in stark red, are all white and drippy. And it just.
What could it be, Terry?
It's the seminal and the violence and the sex. Yes.
Come. Which is so funny because, like, there isn't sex in this movie. But we can talk about perhaps the seductive quality of the woman in black as we talk later. Because there isn't sex in this movie, but also there's a lot of, like, sexuality in very subtle ways, I think. So, yeah. But yes, a good title credit sequence. Again, after watching Final Destination, I'm like, we need to go back to having good opening credit sequences because, good lord, we have like Malignant did it really well, but I feel like for a lot of it we have lost the art of a good opening title credits. So, but from there we cut to a couple months in the future 4 months later. Thank you. Sarah is in perhaps the most depressing ultrasound I've ever seen. Like, I feel like in all of these movies, ultrasounds are like, oh, it's the baby! But it's like blue and dark, and she just looks like she wants to not be there. Her face is covered in scars, and the doctor is very mechanical and very precise of like, everything's great, cool, she, right? She, they keep saying she, so it's a daughter, and they're like, you're going to come in tomorrow. We'll induce you tomorrow. So you're going to have a baby on Christmas Day because it's Christmas Eve. This is a Christmas movie, everybody. Merry Christmas. So basically, she has gone through what is supposed to be like an exciting doctor's appointment, but it is perhaps the most depressing doctor's appointment, followed by what I think is the most incredible conversation ever committed to cinema, where I'm skipping ahead.
Before we get to that, the doctor, what I love about this opening sequence, and I think we're going to talk about this with this incredible dialogue exchange, is the way that this opening little doctor's appointment sets the tone for the rest of the movie, because the doctor says,
yes,
enjoy your last night of peace and quiet. And that is ironic in a multitude of ways.
Ironic, and like, what fucking doctor says that shit? Like, I get what you're trying to be like playful, but nothing about this is playful. Like, the way he is talking to her, the way everything is framed, like, there is nothing playful about it. So like him saying that just adds another layer of sinister shit. Like,
yeah. Well, you never say that in a horror movie because it's not going to be a night of peace and quiet. We know that. Otherwise, there would be no movie. And also, the idea of like...
Night, holy night. Anyway.
But also, your last night, period. End of statement. Like, this is setting up the rest of the movie so perfectly, and then we get to this very weird exchange that I know you're very excited to talk about because I love this moment too.
It's so incredible. Like, Sarah is sitting there, and I think that's something that is really important to note is that I track this a lot. It's like, obviously Sarah is like not about this baby, and we can get that from the get-go. Like, she is not excited at all, but she still is always holding her stomach. And I know that it happens a lot in like movies with pregnancy, but there's something about her that feels like she, even though if she's not happy, she's still trying to protect it. She's holding it close. Like, even though the baby is inside of her, she is still protecting, constantly trying to put some kind of shield between the baby and the world with herself. So I think that's really like something I kind of noticed this time is like her physicality around her pregnant belly. And yes, that's like something that a lot of pregnant women do, but I think here especially, like, that physicality is very calculated. And we see that when she is sitting in the waiting room waiting for, I believe, her mother to pick her up. She's sitting right by a Christmas tree, it's like blinking and she's holding her stomach. She's very quiet. And this fucking old nurse just like comes up to her and starts asking her about her baby, which is like a very, again, funny kind of prelude to what is going to happen of having like this what am I trying to say? Like random woman coming up to you to talk to you about your pregnancy. Old lady in like the kind of vintage nurse's outfit with like the little hat. And she's just talking about how much pain she was in when she had her baby, how miserable it was. And she just takes out a fucking pack of cigarettes and it's just like the pain I was in. And is like smoking a cigarette, telling this pregnant mom how much pain and how much she hated having a baby. And then another nurse is like, you can't smoke in here.
Well, yes, and I love the dialogue too, because she's saying about how she's looking at her and she's like, oh, it won't be long now. And she says, I had 4 kids. And she's like, your first one, I bet. And then she says, it's horrible, the first kid. And she mentions that the first kid took 13 hours to deliver it. And then she pulls out her cigarette and starts smoking. I almost expect her to just like blow in Sarah's face. Like that is like what is happening. But then we go through this and she said, he put me through all of that, but he was dead. And so like this kind of drop there where it's like their first kid is the toughest, 13 hours, and what was it for? The kid is dead after putting her through 13 hours of torment. And I was like,
and it's like,
holy shit.
And it's like, she's just saying this, and then it's punctuated by Sarah turning to her and going, twat. And I was like, Sarah's a bitch. I love it. Because, like, this is, like, the first confirmation we get that, like, Sarah is perhaps not the most likable character. And you know what? Good. Because I feel like pregnant women are treated with gloves in so many movies of, like, sacred pregnancy. Women are pregnant. And she's, like, not the nicest person. For a lot of reasons. We understand. because, you know, grief. But she is not experiencing, like, in, like, the quote I read, like, she's not crying and is, like, this kind of, like, really, you know, we think of, like, grieving mothers and grieving wives, like, crying. She's mean. And I love that. We don't get, like, a lot of looking at grief manifesting as anger and, like, being mean-spirited, especially in women. And this movie does that. And it gives us a woman who, like, is obviously sympathetic, but she's also kind of a bitch. Again, for good reason, but I love that. We're not using kitty gloves with her character. Like, we're really getting into, like, the complicated nature of grief and her really fucked up situation. And I just love that. I love her just calling a nurse a twat and then walking off. Like, her mom shows up and puts on her hat and is like, get the fuck away from me. It's just like, we learned so much about her so quickly with that. And I love that. Like, that one line, we know everything we need to know about Sarah.
Well, and We also get I also got the feeling on this that, like, I think it's very important that when the accident happened, she was 5 months pregnant. Like, yeah. we are at a point of no return that this baby is going to be carried to term.
Yes.
And I have the feeling that if this was any earlier, she probably would have gotten an abortion. Is the feeling I got it. Because this baby is now a reminder of this happy family that she thought she was going to have with, you know, the sort of traditional heteronormative family of a husband, a wife, and a kid. Another kid probably going to be on the way eventually. And that was taken from her. It was destroyed. And now she has to carry this baby to term that she does not want to have, because it's going to be a memory of what she had. And so we get that look at the ultrasound where she just does not seem to care. She is checked out. She is just like, you almost kind of wish you can almost kind of see that she wishes the doctor would say, oh, this kid is not gonna make it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, they never say this, but there is such a vibe of, like, she wishes the baby had died, not her husband. And, like, I think there is very much that, like, and there's a guilt, I think, kind of also steeped into the movie where we see her protecting the baby, but you can also kind of feel her wishing the baby wasn't there. And I think there's a lot of really complicated, unspoken emotions going on. And I love that because, again, this movie is dealing with such complex emotions, but isn't trying to over-explain them or have, like, these extended monologues of her, like, explaining her grief. Alison Paradis, who plays Allison, is that right? Did I get that name right? Not Allison. Alison Paradis, who plays Sarah, plays her so well, where you can just, like, and so I think having both the writing, but her performance together give Sarah so much depth, and so much unspoken stuff is like right there.
Well,
and from the beginning, we get that. From the very
beginning. And she is, I mean, that belly is ready to be burst. Like, she is.
Oh, yeah. Like, she is really pregnant.
Like, they're going to have
to. Like, can barely move.
Pregnant. And
yeah.
So there's that whole aspect of it, because she looks so uncomfortable walking around with that. You could tell that she's just like, I need to get this fucking thing out of me. Like, that is what we're having. And I think that it's such a refreshing look at parenting, or at like pregnancy, because we have a person that doesn't really want this kid but is stuck with it at this point. And I think that's interesting, because it's not someone, and we'll really dig into this later, but it's not someone I think that is really fighting for the kid's survival, but more herself at certain points.
Oh yeah. Oh, 1,000,000%. And that's why I love this fucking movie. Mm-hmm. Like, this, yeah. Yeah.
So we get her mom. She's not like, exactly on best of terms with the kid, with Sarah. Sarah doesn't seem to want to be around her. I don't think she wants to celebrate Christmas. She's like, what does she have to celebrate? Like, this is going to be the first Christmas without her husband, without the person in her life that she loved. She's going to give birth on fucking Christmas. She doesn't want to do anything with her mom. She wants to sit there and just get this fucking baby out of her.
Like, get away from me. And it's like, yeah, exactly. And again, like, we don't get any indication other than like her relationship with her husband was awesome. Like, they loved each other very much. And that's all we need to know. And again, I keep going back to this, but I just love that. Like, loved her husband. It was great. This sucks shit. Because the husband is important and isn't important. You know what I mean? Like, the context is important, but this is Sarah's story. And then we see her photographing a family, because she's a photojournalist, so she's photographing a family, which is creepy as shit. If I saw someone with a fucking giant camera photographing my family, I'd be like, She's obviously trying to understand, like, how do you be a happy family? Like, how do you have these, like, positive, like, how the fuck, like, if I can record this, there's something I can study and look at from, like, a journalistic perspective, perhaps if I can take my impartial eye and capture this, like, what, can I figure it out? Like, can I get the answer I need? And I think, again, such an interesting moment that is unspoken, but you get everything you need to from her photographing that. And then her boss shows up, who we've already gotten like this weird vibe from the mom that there's like a weird relationship between Sarah's boss, her editor, and her. Like, her mom is like, oh, is there something there? And Sarah's like, he's my fucking boss. But like, there's like weird implications of like, is there a relationship? And then he shows up and he's an old dude. I would like, when I first saw this, I was like a hot young guy, but it's like an older dude, like a father figure more than like a relationship figure, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. But there is that sort of like fatherly instinct there, it seems like, in terms of the way the film is framing his relationship with her. He's going to be the one that takes her to the hospital. She's given him her keys to her house. Like, it's obvious that there is some kind of, if not romantic undertones, friendship at the very least, or paternal friendship at the very least. But the other thing I really like about this scene is that it is filmed, talking about the cinematography again, it is filmed like any other early aught film. It has those blues and those greens and desaturated.
Yes, it's my favorite. I'm like, I love the aesthetic. I know.
It is like, they obviously watched The Ring. Like, that is the way this film looks in this opening. And I was like, is this going to continue? And it doesn't, because the movie gets a lot more interesting visually, I think.
Yes,
but this opening,
it does.
This opening is it kind of represents a color for her too. Everything is desaturated. Everything is these blues and greens. Everything just sort of blends together almost. And it's that kind of, well, it's the Ring effect. It's that kind of look that we've seen in those early aught films. But it's used here, I think, to, instead of just being a kind of cool aesthetic that a lot of people started to use it for, I think it is sort of, everything is grayed and washed out in her life, like at this point. And it is a visual motif for what she is going through internally. And I think, I love when cinematography and color choices can just be subtle signifiers of things that set the mood, really.
Yeah, like even that quote, like it obviously is, like I read from the book, it's like so calculated. This isn't just like to look cool and to follow a trend. Like we are trying to get into the heads of these people. Like we are supposed to feel her depression. It's Christmas Eve, but we're not going to get yet these like warm lights and like the happy kind of warmth and this like warmth that you're used to with Christmas. Like we're going to get a very cold, you barely know it's Christmas except for a couple like dialogue moments or like a carefully placed Christmas tree or like string of lights. And this is where we have him go like, oh, I wish you could go photograph more of the riots happening right now. And she's like, well, sorry, I can't do that. And so again, like we get this and this whole conflict of like, put the riots on the front page. Like, let's continue to sow dissent. Like, talk about like sensationalize things. And this connection to like real world violence and personal violence, etc. So, but then from there, we are back at her house where she is alone. And this is where this is like 15 minutes in and like we've already kind of like, we're starting. Yeah. We took 15 minutes to kind of get you acquainted. And then now she is home alone at night. And this is where shit like very quickly starts to go wrong. Like we see a couple things like we see the knitting of her trying to knit for the baby, and there's a hole in it.
Chekhov's knits. This
Chekhov knitting needles. I know. I love it. But I love her looking at the hole in her knitting of like, I can't even knit something for my baby. Like, I can't even make that right. There's just like so much like frustration going on with her as she's alone on her couch, telling her mom, don't come over, like, leave me alone, basically. Like, I'm fine. And she's just alone.
Yeah.
On Christmas Eve.
And we get this really nice moment where she goes into her dark room and there's like a collage of pictures and it shows happiness. It tells us that her relationship, and this is all we need to know. It tells us that her relationship with her husband was loving. There's this really cute picture of him sort of like snuggling in her neck and smiling at the camera. And then she imagines him naked behind her, reaching up and holding her belly. And it's like this very serene moment. The music kind of gets a little melodramatic, but like purposefully so. It's not a knock when I say it's melodramatic, but it is like happiness. And it's like this brief moment of respite that is immediately broken by this image of Matthew's head hitting the windshield. And that reverie is just broken. I love nothing more than a movie that'll give you this like beautiful moment and interrupt it so fucking quickly with like someone's head exploding or some shit. Like, I love that. I love a good like getting knocked out of your fantasy moment, and that happens here because she's allowed one very quick moment of fantasy. But then there's also interesting connection of like once she starts having that fantasy, very quickly this woman appears. We hear a knock on the door. And it's just a voice on the other side, similar to The Strangers, of like, oh, I got into a car accident. My phone is dead. I need to come in. And Sarah, which I think this also speaks to like a larger cultural kind of distrust of people. But I also think the thing that we in the States also were dealing with was a culture of distrust of like, instead of saying, oh yeah, come on in, it's like, what happened? And asking all these questions and not wanting to let someone in. It's fucking Christmas, but like there's riots in the street, everything is fucked, like I'm not letting you in. And then as Sarah asks questions, the woman goes, come on, Sarah, I know your husband's not in there. Like, cause she comes to, oh, my husband's sleeping, like he works, he can't. And she's like, I know your husband's dead. And he's dead. He's dead. At that moment, it's just like, blah. It's that moment where you're like, oh no, it's happening. And that's, of course, Sarah's like, 911, like, can the cops please come? I'm a pregnant woman on Christmas and there is a woman at my door. Like, ACAB, but love that Sarah's first instinct, like, I'm not fucking around with this shit. Like, we are calling the cops immediately. Yeah.
And we'll talk more about how much this movie is an ACAB movie-ish, or not really necessarily ACAB, but like, cops are useless. Anyway.
But we also, and this is where I started thinking about this movie differently than the first time I watched it, because so she looks out the peephole and all she sees is like a form, but it's all dark and it's hard to see. And then once she's called the police, and then we have her saying there's some strange lady outside my house, and then we have the shot of the woman standing in the sliding glass door, like outside of the sliding glass door, and she is framed in darkness. It's hard to really see her. She looks like
This is my favorite part of the whole movie.
She looks like a specter. She looks supernatural. She looks like a ghostly figure that is just standing outside her door, and her hand is kind of pressed against the glass as she is like trying to call the police and tell her. And we don't really see a whole lot, but it's giving me like, we see her black glove, and it's giving me a little bit Giallo vibes, like that kind of black glove killer.
Oh, yeah.
Once we start to actually see this woman, I there's hints of folklore in here, and so I'm really glad that you mentioned how the movie kind of turns into that quote that you brought up, where
like the dark fairy tale, like yes, as the movie progresses, it's like a fairy tale vibes. Because
we have like this image of this woman, and she is dressed all in black. She has a black corset. It's very Victorian. She's wearing these black leather gloves, but it's like, it looks like she could either be in mourning, but like if you take off that corset, she could be in a black mourning dress, which is appropriate, as we'll learn for her character. But also the way it is all put together, she kind of reminds me of like this witch that has just come out of the darkness and is planning to steal her baby, because that is like a folklore tale of witches coming to take a pregnant person's baby, and that is what the image that we are getting here, because she just comes out of nowhere. And even when a little bit later, when Sarah's going through her photographs, trying to, get a photograph of this woman's face, she finds one of her that she's photographing. The woman is just sort of peering out of the forest. And so it gives this like idea that this woman has just come out of nature and is here to take her baby. And it's playing with those sort of witch folklore tales in a little bit. And so the fact that the directors even say that by the end of the film, they were going for like a dark fairy tale, that is what's happening here. We have this evil witch, and we have this woman, and we have this witch trying to get the baby out of the woman.
I love that, because I hadn't thought about the folklore connection, because all I was focusing on was like this amazing reveal of Beatrice Dalle's face, because we have her, we have this figure in the sliding glass door, this terrifying figure, and then she fucking lights a cigarette. Like the nurse, there's this really interesting parallel between her and the nurse for other reasons too.
My roommate also said, is like, oh, is that the nurse? I'm like,
I would have loved if it was the nurse, though. That would have been really fucking cool. But regardless, she lights a cigarette, and all we see is her face illuminated. And it is not a scary, weird witch it is actually a very beautiful woman. Mm-hmm. I think Beatrice Dalle is incredibly beautiful.
She is. And
she is a woman, and I think what is so terrifying and chilling to me about this moment is there's a confidence here. Like, she just casually lights a fucking cigarette. Like, this is not a time to light a cigarette, but this is someone who is so in control and is so confident in her action that she's like, I'm gonna casually, it's so fucking psycho, and I love it so much, because then you see her face lit up, and you're like, oh my god, and she has time to just casually smoke a cigarette. And Sarah, like you were saying, picks up her camera and starts taking pictures with a flash, try to kind of get a picture, scare her away, whatever. And then we have her disappear into the night. Just very casually, as quickly as she came, kind of go away for a moment. Like a ghost. Mm-hmm. And so I love that Sarah is so quickly able to develop in her fucking dark room on her digital camera. And I was like, that part, I was like, But you know what? Whatever. It's a movie. I won't think too hard about her going in there to develop that picture so quickly, because then the cops show up pretty quickly, which again, shocking. Cops actually showing up in a timely manner, which I think this is where this movie kind of inverts expectations. This isn't she calls and no one shows up. The cops do show up. 3 of them. There's a man, 2 men and a woman who show up, and they're like, there's no one here. Sorry. And very quickly establishing this whole, cops kind of suck and, aren't very useful, which I think adds to, this political background. And again, will continue as we see the cops are not able to save her in various ways.
The fact that the cop looks at her belly, they've asked her if she's alone, and then looks at her belly and says, another guy being afraid of being a father. And she's like, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
And she was like, suck my dick from the back.
Exactly.
This is so much more complicated than your stupid myopic viewpoint of what motherhood and parenting is, which I also think speaks so much to what this movie is trying to be about, trying to break away from a myopic version of what people think parenthood and motherhood is in horror. But they're basically like, we'll just have people patrol. And she's like, sick. And then, like, they leave. And then, guess who's in the house?
Yep. While she's sitting there in her chair, we get this delicious... and as I was watching this, I kept thinking, I wonder if Brian Bertino saw this movie, or if it like influenced the way that they shot some of The Strangers, because we have this gorgeous reveal of her sitting in the chair and there's darkness behind her, and again we have the witchy figure just sort of materializing out of the darkness, and the darkness is sort of hazy, and it has that sort of shot on film look where it's a little the film looks a little dirty and it's kind of hard to see, and she just shows up, and then she just sort of evaporates back into the darkness until she is no longer there. And it's such a gorgeous shot that reminded me of the shot from The Strangers where the man is like stepping in behind Liv Tyler.
Yes.
She's standing there. Like, that is what this is giving me a year before that movie were to come out, and I love it.
I love it too. I love how this is like already playing with, there's no violence yet, but they're playing with this threat of violence and impending violence. And what is so awesome is like, so Sarah, I'm trying to remember the sequence of things in terms of like, because Sarah is, I think she's hiding in the bathroom when her boss comes. Is that the sequence of events? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that's a little bit, it's a little bit later.
Is that later? Okay, hold on. Yeah. Sorry. I forgot that. For some reason, my brain just like... Oh, it's right, because she calls her boss and is like, hey, there's some like weird shit happening. Like, can you please help me figure out like what's going on? Can you enhance the photo? Mm-hmm. And then she decides that I'm going to go to bed and just like sleep this off, whatever. And this is where we get our first like lady wants to cut baby out of tummy scenario, because this is where we see her again come out of the shadows. Sarah is asleep. And she's got a giant pair of scissors. Everyone loves the scissors and inside. And this is when she actually penetrates Sarah's skin on her belly.
She has her scissors, and she has the bottle of, I'm guessing, sanitite, like some kind of alcohol or something.
The image of her just dipping the scissors in it, and then just like very artfully
dragging the scissors up her tummy until she gets to that belly button, and then just it goes in.
Like, there's a world where I could see these two fucked up women being mommies together. This is not that movie.
This is not that movie, but yeah.
But, again, there's like a sensuality to again, so this is Beatrice Dalle, who is playing this woman, and she's La Femme, is what she's called, I believe, in the credits. The woman in black. She's never given a name. She is just known as the woman. And as you were saying, she is wearing this like incredible black outfit, like very stylish. Like, one of my notes is Beatrice Dalle is serving cunt in this movie. Like, she did not have to, like, there does not need to be this much of a serve in the outfit, but like, I respect it. And thinking about it as a fairy tale, it makes even more sense. And like having that aesthetic of her having like a fairy tale-esque outfit on. But this is their first kind of confrontation and our first act of really fucked up violence in that moment. Like in this particular house scenario, not the car accident. Because this is where Sarah wakes up and is like, what the fuck? Sarah gets a big slash across her face with the scissors. So we're already harming the pregnant woman, not just on her womb, but like on her face where she already has scars. And Sarah escapes to the bathroom, which becomes like her at first perfectly beautiful white tiled bathroom, which is very quickly soaked in crimson as this movie goes along. But like, I also love the geography of the house that they establish so quickly. Because so often movies are like, kind of confuse you about where everything is. But here you get a very quick kind of idea of like where everything is in the house. And she doesn't have a lot of places to hide. It is not a big house. And so that bathroom is like her one refuge. And so we see her in the bathroom hiding and trying to figure out what the fuck to do. And I think this is where we start seeing what you were talking about, Terry, of her protecting herself and not her baby. Because we don't see her doing the belly thing, protecting thing anymore that I talked about at the beginning, where we see her kind of holding her belly. Now, she's not, like, it's exposed, like, you know, even though she's wearing, like, she's no longer trying to protect her baby or the womb. She's like, how the fuck do I get out of this alive? And so now becomes this beautiful just stream of people coming in the house that are then meticulously murdered, mostly by the woman in black. But my favorite thing about this movie is the first murder is not by that woman. It's my favorite. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm just foreshadowing that I love that this movie does that. Because this is when the people start coming in the house. Other people. And again, sorry, I'm like rambling. I love this fucking movie. This is such a movie where like so many people come into the house. Like in so many slashers, no one's able to come in. This movie, there are so many people who come in here who should be able to save her. But guess the fuck what? They can't.
Yeah. Well, so I started like while you said a phrase, and you've said it a couple times now, that just like unlocked something in my head. You kept calling her the woman in black, and that is the name of a gothic horror novel from 1983.
Oh yeah,
that was turned into a movie with Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel Radcliffe, right? Okay.
Yes, but again, if you look at like the image of that, we have an image that is strikingly similar to kind of the dress that she is wearing, and I think that is again another kind of connection to this idea of this sort of like spectral being, this witch, because the woman in black, I've not read the book, but I was looking up a synopsis for it, and it is about a sister giving birth to a child, and she was unmarried. She's forced to give the child to her sister. Like, there is a nugget in that original story that I think they're pulling from. And so that's why, again, I think this woman in black kind of ideology is kind of making this sort of, is this woman ghostly? Because in the beginning she feels ghostly, and I do think the movie, as the movie goes on and we see her more as a person and less as this specter that's haunting her, the movie starts to bring more realism to it, and eventually gives us a reason for why this is all happening. But in this initial stages, we have this very striking image of this woman who just appears places. When Sarah's in her bed and we're looking at her and we look up and she's just standing there, she just seems to appear. She sort of vanishes out into the darkness. She just comes into the darkness. She is there. She has malicious intent. It is the classic idea of the witch coming for the baby, but it is also, I think, rooted in this gothic horror novel by Susan Hill. I think it's impossible to like miss these connections here with that once you start to like understand a little bit more of like, because I when I first watched this, I never really thought about any of that, but looking at it critically, I think you can see sort of direct lines from gothic fiction, particularly because she's wearing a Victorian like corset. She looks like she stepped out of a Victorian gothic novel. Like, that is what she looks like.
Well, and Sarah's wearing a fucking white nightgown.
Yep.
She changes from like
visual motifs of the white and the black from the very opening sequence.
Exactly. So that's really fucking cool. But from there, we have the boss come and meet the woman in black. Like, so much, it just starts going. Like, he comes over to check on her. The woman in black is there and is like kind of seductive to him, which I kind of love. She's just like, stay for a drink. Like, look, and like her hair is down. Like, and like, okay, let's talk about Beatrice Dalle here, because this is where like,
this is where we get to see Beatrice a lot more.
We really get to see her. So Beatrice Dalle is a French actor. She was in Trouble Every Day, if you were familiar with that, the Claire Denis cannibal movie, where she is one of the cannibals. She's in a lot of French cinema. She's gorgeous. She has like a signature gap between her front teeth. She has beautiful eyes. Like, she's just a very beautiful woman. She has a presence to her. And there's something about her when you look at her that just screams like both very alluring and very scary. Like, just, that is the vibe she gives out. And, well, we did a little bit of research about her as a person. And guess what? That vibe fits who she is as a person. And I kind of love that for her. Terry, do you want to tell us a little bit more?
I sure do. So there are a couple interviews with her where she just like, whether she's being truthful or whether she's just, taking the piss and having fun. This actress appeared on the French program Divan, where she divulged some of her past antics, and she explained to the visibly shocked host that she used to work in a morgue with some friends, and one time they, quote unquote, made ourselves a meal. She said she had taken a taste of the ear of this body because we wanted to eat because we had taken acid, reports the local. And then she downplays the incident by laughing and mockingly reassuring the host, "Ooh la la, it's okay."
I love this bitch so much. Like, I don't even care if it's fake. The fact that she went on television and said, like, I did acid and ate a man's ear, like a dead man's ear, and then she was like, he was dead, he doesn't know it's gone. Queen shit. And then, yes, it's feral and really chaotic, I get it. But damn if I do not love an unhinged woman who is just like, yeah, I just live for weird chaos. Like, yeah, bitch. Yeah, you do.
And then there's an interview with her from The Guardian where, I mean, the headline is perfect. Betty Blue's Beatrice Dalle, quote unquote, "I love Christ because he invented bondage," is her quote. But then the article, look, like,
she's not wrong. Am I going to hell?
But then this interview starts off with the interviewer asking, "Can it really be true, I ask Beatrice Dalle, that you seduced English actor Rupert Everett, who is notoriously, he's gay. He's a gay man." And she says, "Rupert Everett is gay, but I am," she pauses for effect, "Beatrice Dalle. I've never thought I'm beautiful, but I have the power of attraction."
Yeah, fucking, you can say that again. Damn.
And so apparently they dated for a while. And in his 2006 memoir, Red Carpets and Other Banana Skins, Everett described their affair. "I was gay, but incompatibility is the agonizing driving force behind many dangerous liaisons." At the time, Dalle had just become internationally famous as the femme fatale Betty Blue in Jean-Jacques Benot's 1986 film of the same name. And Everett was in Paris. And I knew I would never find another girl as good as Bea. She was perfect. When she was with you, she was with you. She had faith, and you could do no wrong until that attention would be switched off like an electric light. It had happened to her husband. It would happen to me. No one left Bea. And she says,
like, she sounds like she's probably like very difficult to be with.
Oh, I'm sure. And she, when this interview asked Dalle about it, she says, "Well, it's true. Most of my liaisons have been dangerous." Her first husband, painter Jean-Francois Dalle, killed himself 3 months after their breakup. She met her second husband.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
She met her second husband, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, when filming a movie in the prison where he was serving time for rape. She divorced him in 2014, and he became violent again. In between them,
I will just say, also, this guy raped and assaulted his ex-girlfriend. She met with him 24 times. 24 1-hour time, like 1 hour visitations. They got married. Not well behavior.
No.
I love her, but that's weird.
In between, she had a tempestuous relationship with rapper Joey Starr, a man with a fuse so short he once punched a monkey on a TV show. Like, this
woman's life is incredible. What the heck?
Her story is just like a folklore as itself. Like, her story, her life cannot be real. Like, I cannot believe. It's just, they're very interesting. Like, she just has an interesting life, and I think that might be why she was chosen for this, because she just exudes sexuality, but also this coldness. Like, the way that she interacts with Jean-Pierre, the chief editor that is Sarah's boss, is one mix of like this very stoic, kind of mean, almost impenetrable look, but then also this oozing sexuality. And it's such a interesting dichotomy that I think probably isn't necessarily acting.
Well, and the thing is, like, she acts like she's a fucking predator just toying with her prey, which makes sense in this movie, but like that's the way she talks to a lot. Like, I think that's her vibe. Like, she's toying with people.
Right.
And I think that's what it feels like in this. Like, she's playing with everyone who comes in. Like, she's toying with them. And I think that kind of isn't too far off from how maybe she at least portrays herself to the public as a person, which is fascinating. I mean, like, she's got a similar vibe in Trouble Every Day, when she plays a cannibal, like a sex cannibal. And
I've not seen it.
It's so good. Oh my God. Maybe that'll be our next movie.
Yeah, I mean, direct through line there. But the other thing is that, like, kind of how you're saying that she toys with people. She could have let this man leave. He could have left, and then he would have been out of her hair. Yeah. But then as he's leaving, she's like, well, why don't you stay for a drink? And so again, we have this like this situation where like he could have left. She could have just let him go and gone back to tormenting Sarah. But no, she's like, no, why don't you come back in here? I'm
no. We're not done. We're not done. Well, and then she's talking to him, and then the mom shows up too. The real mother shows up, and she's like, what the fuck is going on? And so she finally goes upstairs to be like, Sarah, where are you? But Sarah doesn't know anyone's there.
Nope, she has her ear against the door, and she is listening for a moment to strike with a needle to save her life.
The knitting needle. Ooh, and the first death in this movie is at the hands of Sarah, who kills her own mother with a knitting needle in her neck. And it is fucked up. Like, stabs her, pulls it out. We get, like, an arterial spray moment as the mom is, like, falling to the ground. Oh, the arterial spray in this movie is so good.
It's so
like, they really, they put a lot of budget into making sure that fucking spray was getting everywhere.
Between that or later on with a tracheotomy, like, there is...
Bloop, bloop, bloop. The tracheotomy!
Pumping everywhere, and it is... so gloriously. And what I love about it is, again, we have this motif of her being in white, the other person, the woman being in black. We have this white, pretty much white bathroom that eventually is going to be more red than it is white. And we have the hallways that, again, are very white, and they're just being coated with blood, which goes back to that sort of seminal motif that starts the film with the credit sequence. It's just, there's a lot of that interplay of white and red and black. And it's just...
Yes.
It's so perfect.
Awesome. It's so perfect. And then, like, so then Sarah's panicking about killing her mom. The boss comes up and is like, what in the hell? Woman in black stabs him in the knee and just starts fucking...
And then in the crotch.
Just in the crotch, and then puts a pillow, like, drags him down the stairs and then puts a pillow over his face and stuff. Like, she is, like... She's angry. And that's why this movie is feral. This woman is not just focused on Sarah. Like, she is pissed, and she is violent, and she is a wild animal, just, like, ready to rip apart flesh of anyone who gets in her path. And I love that. This woman is given agency to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's a thing we don't see a lot of, like, women, especially women villains, get in horror. And she just goes full, like, feral creature in this movie. And I love it so much that we see this feral woman. And then Sarah starts going, like, as Sarah gets covered in more and more blood from herself, from various other people that come into the house, from, like, the cops that check on her, who, there's a kid in the back seat who has been arrested from the riots, and they show up, and, like, it's just, it's just, like, all of these terrible things happening, and like, the woman in black pretending to be Sarah, like, when the cops knock on the door, and she's like, hello? Like, she didn't have to answer the door, but she's like, hi. Like, she's calculated in her actions and wants to lure more. It's almost like she wants to lure more people into her, like, bloody little trap.
Yeah.
And it's just, oh, God.
Well, and the other thing that I really wanted to kind of touch on, again, with the way the film looks. So when we were outside earlier, we had the sort of the ring effect with, like, the desaturated greens and blues and everything. But inside the house, I noticed that this house is very warmly lit. There's a lot of, like, interplays of darkness, but then there's also a lot of warm lighting that reminds me again of The Strangers. We talked about this in when we were talking about The Strangers, where the inside of the house has a sort of, like, hazy look to it. And this movie, at some point, I kept thinking, is this house on fire? Because there's a lot of smoke. There's, like, it looks as if, again, she is stuck in this kind of cigarette. Like, the idea of cigarettes and smoke is, like, permeates this entire thing. And the house has a very hazy quality to it. The lights are kind of diffused. Everything feels like that there's been a puff of smoke that is just diffusing the light as it continues from the lamps and whatnot. And the whole movie has a hazy feel, as if we are stuck in a cigarette almost. It's such an interesting visual motif.
Inside, stuck in cigarette. Very French. Very French. But it is, though. Like, there is a warmth to this house, which, again, like, goes against what we saw at the beginning. But it also plays this idea of, like, the home being very supposed to be your safe space. And in home invasion movies, like, you're defending it. But she's in that house immediately. Like, it was barely even a break. It wasn't really, like, a break-in. It was more like she just phased through the walls. Again, she was like, I'm in ho.
She is supernatural.
I'm in ho.
Has entered.
Yes. Well, like, again, like, the way she's able to use her, like, femininity to trick people, too. Because, again, she's able to, like, let people into the house and trick them and make them think that she's friends with Sarah because she's a beautiful woman. Women are more trustworthy, like, than men in these scenarios, especially in, like, a horror movie scenario like this. Like, she is so quick to weaponize her femininity. And I, again, love that. She weaponizes men, a lot of men, specifically men, because almost every person who dies in this movie at her hand. Every person she kills in this movie, sans at the end, is a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well,
the only woman
we don't know
who's
the gender of the cat because does the cat die?
True.
The cat dies.
Okay,
but
yeah,
you know,
but like it's really interesting that the only woman, again, besides the end, that is killed in this movie is by Sarah, and all of the men are killed by the woman in black. And I think there's something just interesting there about, like, weaponizing femininity, but then also, like, mother-daughter trauma. And, like, it's just so complicated. This movie is so complex, but so simple at the same time. And again, it is taking those really simple narratives from horror that we know and love and adding such incredible emotional insanity to it that it's just so complicated. But it's only as complicated as you're willing to kind of buy into it. I think that they, like, look, if you don't want to fucking look into this any further, then you'll love it. But there's also really cool stuff when you start thinking, like, peeling back the layers of this movie and get inside it.
Oh, God. Sorry. I also think that's the kind of movie I like when you can watch a movie from various ways. You could sit down, like, the first time you sit down and watch this movie, I was like, this is a very lean, mean thriller. I'm really enjoying this. It's bloody. It's gross.
Ooh,
it's intense. And you can see that, but then you can also start to peel back the layers and see how complex it actually is. That it's an onion, and we're just stripping each stinky layer away and seeing something even worse inside. I love this situation, even though I knew the cat was going to die immediately. So listeners, if you're worried about that,
it's 2007. This is not an era where we care about the pets. Sorry, everybody. It breaks my heart, but, like, it's just kind of what happens in these kinds of movies.
The conversation that follows, or that continues, I guess, before, during, and after she snaps this cat's neck, is the first time that they have an actual conversation together, and we hear the intent directly from the woman. And she says, I want one. She tells Sarah, open the door. I want one. Oh. And Sarah responds, what kind of man would fuck a crazy person like you? And then she responds, you don't want that child. I'll take good care of it. And so we have, like, the motive and the intent right there.
Is she wrong?
And she's not exactly wrong.
You know what I mean, though? Like, obviously her actions are wrong, but, like, if you...
There are better ways of going about this.
She is wrong in how she does it, but she is not wrong in her, like, assumptions about Sarah wanting the baby. Perhaps committing a Christmas time C-section is not the way you should have gone about that. But I
don't know what the adoption situations are like.
Justice for the woman in black. She's innocent. Absolutely not.
It's an interesting way of reading this film.
Yeah, Mary Beth, what? Just chewing on a human ear like it's fucking bubblegum. Sorry. Just this sexy fucking French woman going to town on an ear. Anywho, that's not this movie. But
then we get the cops showing up, right? And
yes,
they're a different set of cops from the first time, because again we have the riots happening. So they have a log. There's a log that the woman was harassing Sarah. So this other set of cops come, 3 of them, and also
he's a young Muslim boy in the back. A young Muslim boy they had arrested from the riots, and they make it very clear that this was a boy from the riots. He's obviously a boy, like he is person of color, and they arrested him because he was rioting. And there is that whole thing of like, the white cops with the person of color in the backseat. So they show up because they're like, we have to go check on this person. Like, it's on the log. Sorry, working on, it's like the whole like, oh, we have to work on Christmas. Everything's poopy. And it's like, well, sorry about it. And they go to check, and well, wouldn't you just look at that? The cops can't do jack shit against this crazy ass woman. No.
But I will give them credit, because they talk to her and they leave, and she's like, oh, it's just my, what's that noise? Oh, it's just my old antique.
Oh, it's like, it's your old yes, the washing. It's fucking like, Sarah stabbing the wall with a pair of scissors.
And they're like, okay, and then they leave, but then they realize, wait a moment, there's an important detail that the report said, and they come back and they're like, there's just one stupid detail. Just wondering what you were going to name him your child, because she ain't pregnant. And I love that moment, because they come back.
Yeah, that's fair. They do. They're like,
that fair. This is not
that's
Sarah.
Fair.
And
I do appreciate that. Like, they do actually do actual detective work, like actual police work, rather than just being dumb. So, as much as I've said this movie is like anti-cop, it maybe isn't anti-cop, but a little bit like cops.
Well, they're cops,
like authority figures.
Movies.
Yeah, but I love that here is where they still try to show like look, like they did some very basic recognition of things. Ooh, but just because they did doesn't mean they're going to survive this woman who is ready to kill anyone and anything. So there's one guy on the phone who stays in the car with the kid that they arrested, and there's is it two other guys, or is it one? Two other guys go in, and then the guy on the phone hears things go wrong, and he's like, uh-oh.
What I do love is, once they realize that this woman is not who she says she is, one cop stays with her, the other cop has his gun out and is walking upstairs and sees the blood trail, sees the body of the woman, sees the blood on the wall, sees...
Well, that's my favorite. All
Sarah's
upstairs.
Hand. We also
that's right.
Mention, Sarah's hand has been stabbed into the wall, and she is stuck there. Oh my god!
And she's just like, "Hello, help me!" But again, most of the blood there's blood downstairs, but a lot of it is upstairs. So like when you first come in the house, it's like a little less like weird, but then because we see this with when the second wave of cops come in, they go upstairs, they start puking. Well, no, they start puking downstairs too, because that's when they realize like, oh, she has now littered bodies everywhere. But the cop goes upstairs and sees that Sarah has been pinned to the wall, because there's a scuffle before the cops show up where like Sarah tries to leave, but then the woman sees her. Sarah tries to run into the bathroom. The woman grabs her hair before she can shut the door, rips her hair. Sarah stabs her with another knitting needle, and like the part of the knitting needle is sticking out of her arm. And then at one point, Sarah is trying to get out and puts her arm through a hole, which is like horror movie 101. Don't do that shit. But she's like trying to get something, and the woman grabs her hair.
Because she had imprisoned Sarah in there by moving like a shelf so that the handle could not open, and so she's trying to reach out and push that away so she can get out while Sarah is busy, and she just while the woman is busy, and she just jams a knife into her hand into the wall. But when the officer goes upstairs, what does he say? He says, it's a fucking war zone up here. And so again, we have that kind of connection of what is happening interior to this is also happening outside in the world. It's like the micro version of it, that there's a war zone happening, and then outside there is thousands of rioters and thousands of violence happening right outside. And so it kind of connects the two. And I think that's important. I do think that is an important distinction here, but this honestly is the area where I do think the film kind of loses that half star for me, because I think so much time
interesting
cops, and I feel like the pacing with them is a little sluggish, and I don't know if it's necessarily needed in terms of I get why it's here. I like some of the thematic weight that's being attached here with the kid, the immigrant, obviously not white kid that's in the back of the car. Like, I get why we're doing this, but this whole sequence just feels a little too it takes too much tension off of what is really just a woman versus woman fight. And I do think that this sort of slows down the movie for me. This whole part of the movie, even though it is very vicious, very bloody, very gory, very like really kind of speaking to my gorehound, it is just like, I don't know if it's needed, because I don't want we've building to such a climax between them, and it just sort of takes the wind out of that fight between the two of them. And so for me,
okay, yeah, I can see that. I get that.
Isn't for me.
I get that. Yeah, because then when we have the cop bringing the young kid in, the kid who was like, honestly, he's an innocent bystander at this point.
Yes, he is an innocent bystander.
Well, like he's an innocent bystander. Like he was arrested, but we don't know like what he was doing. And especially now in like 2023, we know that young people of color are arrested constantly, especially if they're at protests and riots. In scare quotes.
Yeah, they're saying that he was involved with Molotov cocktails. He says he doesn't mess with them. Like there's like
there's a lot of really interesting.
You don't know who's telling the truth, but also I'm going to probably side with this poor kid that was just probably arrested.
Well, and exactly, like, no matter what this kid did, he should not be brought. Like, he's being led absolutely like a dog. Does not. Yeah, like he's fodder. Like, exactly. Like they keep him in the handcuffs. They drag him inside. He's being forced to look at these fucking bodies everywhere. This kid is throwing up. The cop is like, "Get it together," and the kid is like, "What do you mean, get it together?" Like, what the fuck? And of course, like, this poor kid is also killed by the woman in black, like, stabbed in the head with scissors. So it's just, like, another interesting kind of layer of commentary of, like, these immigrants, people of color, being just, like, fodder in these both real and personal conflicts, and how, like, they are kind of, so often become these, like, casualties when they don't necessarily need to be. So, like, while, again, like, that's not the like, focus of this movie, I think that Maury and Bustillo are doing something really interesting in integrating the riots here, and I think it's very important of, like, showing, like, this cultural moment to French audiences, and, like, while, like, U.S. audiences might not get it, it is a very pointed and very, like, purposeful inclusion here. Because now that, after she's killed all of them, it's now just, again, her and Sarah.
Well, and again, this is sort of why I think this kind of goes on for a little too long, because the cops have, like, they've got the knife out. She keeps saying, "I killed my mother," crying. They're trying to calm her down. She says, "You're going to go call for an ambulance and backup." They help her out. They send her to her bedroom. They've given her a coat. The lights go out in the house because she has messed with the circuit breakers, and then they're going downstairs to circuit. There's just a lot of this kind of stuff that feels like extemporaneous to me that isn't necessarily, like, I feel like they've kind of written themselves into a corner by having the police come in, so now they have to really dispatch of them, and I think I feel that this takes on a little too much time that kind of just, for me, slows things down.
Okay, fair. However, I do say, if they hadn't come, they wouldn't have had that fucking cop with no eyeballs attack Sarah with the baseball bat and fucking hit her in the pregnant stomach, and then her fucking That's not her water breaking, though, because her water breaks earlier in the movie. Really early. So, something else is happening with that. Sorry, I don't know anything, but something bad. Because she comes out of the like, from upstairs and is like, "Okay, are you cool?" He has no eyes. He doesn't know it's not the woman in black. He starts fucking attacking Sarah and beating her with a bat. Which, okay, this is going to sound crazy. I love that this movie does not treat a pregnant woman as precious. It is. I do not like seeing this happen, but I think that there is something here in terms of like, not shying away from taboos and, like, showing that this kind of violence is possible. And especially that this kind of violence is possible by a cop. And it's not that the cop doesn't know. So I think there is something really awesome, so I know that sounds crazy, going on here in terms of just that, again, that nihilism in this genre of just, like, no one and nothing is safe from fucked up violence. And then, of course, Woman in Black comes and kills him because he's trying to kill the baby that she wants. And then we just got mano-y-mano, woman-on-woman violence.
Here's the thing. I wanted more of You wanted more
woman-on-woman violence?
Yes, I wanted this because, like, at this point, it's been this cat and mouse game between the two of them, And then we have the final, like, there's no place to hide anymore. We must fight.
Yeah.
And I love this moment. First we have Sarah's laying in bed and the woman is on top of her. And again, it feels very intimate, almost like a sex scene. She's rubbing her face up against her.
It does, though. It's like kind of, it's sexy. It's weird.
And then Sarah bites her and they end up rolling. And then they're fighting downstairs and they're just kicking each other. They're grabbing her hair. They're dragging her. Sarah's scrambling to her feet. And then she holds the needle to her belly as a threat. And I love this because it's like, she's like, this is what you want. I'm going to make sure you don't get it. And she does not care.
She's like, I don't care about the...
It's about
and again, she's ready to fuck. It's about survival. She's like, fuck the baby. I want to live. And you know what? Respect. Like, again, we never see that.
No, we don't.
We never see that. And I love that. I know that might be controversial, but I also think a lot of people are like, it's not always, women aren't always going to want to sacrifice themselves for their babies.
No, and especially when you
especially if they're an unborn baby. I know that the baby is going to be due and is basically, but like, I think it is such an incredible commentary about like how people don't want to fucking put themselves on the line for fetuses.
Well, and I mean, you got to understand also what this baby represents. It represents this broken promise. That's like, she thought she was going to have a baby. She thought she was going to have a husband, and they were going to live happily ever after. And it's this, the baby is a reminder, and would be a continual reminder of the fact that she doesn't have that happy ending. So then the woman smashes her head with a toaster, and then we have this motif of the smoking again, where she is like mocking her with a cigarette. And we had that earlier too with the poor kid that was, arrested, where she is like smoking in his face before murdering him. And so we have again this hazy idea of what is happening in this house, and this a lot of smoke, but it's such a theme that gets turned on her, because then as she is lighting up her cigarette, Sarah fucking sprays an aerosol can and burns half of her face away, and it is gnarly. The effects in this are so gnarly and gross and just painful to watch.
Melting your face, bitch. And is that before or after Sarah then performs her own tracheotomy on her?
So she can't, because right after that, she
That's
can't
right.
breathe.
Right after she can't breathe, and then she does the tracheotomy on herself, which is like, again, I love a movie that has someone do a tracheotomy on themselves. There's a couple movies where that happens, and for some reason, I just love that shit. There's something about it that's so visceral, and is so, like, you don't think about, like, it seems so simple, but, like, being able to breathe like that and performing such a small act of self-mutilation to save yourself, but it's so fucked up, like, it's just so cool.
Well,
I love
again,
it.
with the spurting blood, it is just
the spurting blood.
Gushing blood every time. And when she... what my favorite moment is when she's trying to breathe, and it's almost like it's bubbling up. Like,
it's a gurgling. She's like gurgling. Oh,
it looks like a
so
volcano
gross.
That is like, the lava's like bubbling up. It's bubbling there, and it's so good. And then she uses duct tape and she fashions herself a Band-Aid so she's not bleeding to death. Like, this is exciting, and I think this is why the previous part is just so annoying to me, because again, we have this fantastic, intense battle, and it's like vicious and bloody, and it's people we care about.
See, but I also, I totally get that. I think that's something for me that I love, is that, like, I think in my head, she kind of needed that to realize the strength she has in herself, which sounds like super cheesy, I know. But I think in this whole movie, she's so fucking depressed and so upset and angry, but doesn't know what to do with those emotions. And she's just trying to hide from everything, like from her emotions, from people, and from the woman in black. And when she's finally confronted with no one else coming to help her, she finally realizes, like, oh, I can do this. I can survive, which also makes the ending and what happens at the end with the baby all the more fucked up, because this woman can fucking live. She has been slashed. Like, not only did she live through a fucking terrible car accident and the death of her husband, she has been slashed, stabbed, she killed her own mom. She's been fucking hit with a toaster. She gave herself a tracheotomy. She's and she's fucking in labor this whole time. Like, she's like, I'm not going down. Like, I do actually want to live. Like, I lived, bitch, that meme. Which makes, again, the ending all the more fucking tragic, because, she's ready to go. And then, as we get this reveal that because they're like, Sarah's kind of finally has the upper hand, and then that's when the woman
is when she fashions her weapon. She takes the knife, she jams it into the cupboard, she takes a pole, she jams it into the handle of the knife, and now she has an extended pole with the knife on it.
Very final girl bullshit here. Very Your Next vibes. Very Your Next vibes.
And it's giving me Ripley against the aliens. It's giving me woman has I am ready to fucking go.
I'm ready to fucking go. But again, it doesn't feel like she's defending her baby. She's defending herself, which again I love. I'll fucking fight you for my life. She corners the woman. We get this reveal that the woman was the person in the other car, and she lost her baby in the car accident that killed Sarah's husband. And they both lost something in that car accident.
But we also realize that opening shot of the baby that's getting smashed against the screen is not Sarah's baby.
It's not Sarah's baby. It's her baby. And so there's this really interesting now play here with monstrous motherhood, and it just makes this movie a really incredible monstrous motherhood movie. And we get this reveal that I think is really interesting. And I think this is a revenge movie, and I just love that reveal. But then a fucking court. Okay. Oh, that's right. This is the part where the guy comes back to life. The guy with no eyes beats the shit out of Sarah.
And then ends up getting killed by the woman.
Yes, the woman in black.
Maybe because the woman in black saves her from this guy beating her up, and you almost start to think that maybe there's some kind of common ground between the two of them, because as she's Sarah's climbing up the stairs, she says the baby's coming, and the woman's like, shh, calm down, I'm right here. Sarah says,
and that's after Sarah starts screaming mommy, which is so fucking heartbreaking. She's screaming mommy. She's like, the baby is coming, the baby is stuck.
Yep.
And then she essentially consents to the woman in black doing what she's been trying to do the whole time, which is fucking insane. But also, I think that it's also really interesting because she's get the baby out. But again, it's not we don't feel get the baby out for, it's there's a feeling of this baby is coming no matter if I want it or not, and we gotta get it out of me. We gotta get it out, so I guess you just gotta do what you gotta fucking do. It's the survival thing. Because I think at this point, Sarah realizes there's no coming back from this. You're back. Okay, so you froze for a second. Sorry.
Okay.
I think there's a moment where Sarah's well, this fucking sucks. I tried really hard, but there ain't nothing I can do about it now. So I guess just do what you gotta fucking do. And this is where we get our beautiful, beautiful stairwell C-section via sewing scissors. It's fuck.
Gross.
It's so gross.
It's so
gross. It's disgusting.
And and again, we have such beautiful practical effects, because that mound on her stomach is not her real belly, but in real
they're not giving her an actual C-section.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that I love that because of practical effects, it looks so real that this woman is getting her belly cut open, and we are able to see that, and it is so disgusting.
It's so disgusting. It's still, me watching it was just oh my god. It's a lot, because again, Sarah is screaming, and that's the part I think is even harder, is the screams of Sarah getting her body ripped apart. Because I don't know if y'all know what C-sections what you have to go through, but you're cutting through skin, fat, and muscle to get to your uterus, and also moving around your organs to get to that. So this is all done without anesthesia, any kind of numbing. And yeah, Sarah's in pain, but the screaming is just Sarah basically dying as she feels her entire body being rearranged, which I also think is an incredible kind of discussion of pregnancy in general, of how pregnancy, when you're pregnant, your entire body rearranges itself to fit this thing in it. And as the woman in black is undoing all of that, it is all falling out of Sarah's body.
And it calls back to the opening credits too, with the way the credits are a bunch of blood, and there's actual hands reaching into things, and it's this is the C-section. This is the promise that this movie opens up with, that this is going to happen.
the blood, like, just, like, oozing. Like, we just see the shot of the blood out of Sarah just coming down the stairs as she's cutting the baby out.
And getting caught in, like, the clothes. Like, it's pooling in some of the clothes in front of her. Like, it's just, there's a lot of little details here that just make this so gross.
It's so bad. But then, I mean, like... my husband appeared. We get this incredible, like, shot, like, incredible, like, ending sequence where the woman in black with her half-melted face has the baby in her arms and is in a rocking chair.
She's walking through the dark house again. And
yeah, hazy. Again, it's hazy. The lighting is very hazy, and, like, it almost looks like there's a fire. Again, like that fairy tale vibe of someone sitting by, like, a fireplace. It's got this very, like, kind of detached vibe. There's no longer all these house details. It's very much just, like, shadow and this figure in the dark of her holding the baby in a rocking chair. And then we pan to Sarah, whose insides are everywhere.
Yep, she looks like an alien has burst out of her.
Yep. And we see the woman, and then the baby starts crying, and the baby's alive. Because, again, we haven't had any there's a lot of thinking, like, is the baby even gonna fucking survive any of the shit that just happened? And there's this incredible shot of, like, a blood tear coming out of Sarah's, like, tear duct, and then we just end on this image of the woman in black rocking the baby back and forth with her fucked up face.
It again, going back to what the directors had said about kind of ending on, like, a dark fairy tale, we have this woman, again, sitting in this rocking chair. There's red light. It's almost like she's being bathed in, like, this hazy light, red light, and darkness. And again, it's this image of this sort of witch that has taken the body, and she has become the kind of haggy type woman that is typically associated with women, with witches, because her half of her face is all burned. Her eye is mottled shut, like, from the burn, and she just her hair is missing. Like, there's, like,
yeah,
of it
the beauty of her is gone. Like, she is a monster, the monstrous mother. Mm-hmm. She becomes that monstrous mother.
She's become that witch in fairy tales that we see, and she has the woman's baby. She has stolen the woman's baby, just like in the folkloric tradition of witches coming for babies that was popularized as well in the movie The Witch by Eggers. You know, it's like this woman has her baby, the other woman is dead, bleeding tears. And we have this crescendo of music. Again, you'd mentioned earlier how much work the music does. This music is violins, and it's building to a crescendo, and then it just cuts out and it's fade to black. And it's just a perfect ending.
It's a perfect ending. This movie is incredible. I love this movie. You know what? It's a 5-star for me, I think. Like, all of my issues with it aside, in terms of, like, the CGI baby and shit, I think that Mowry and Bastillo, for being two white men, fucking nailed monstrous motherhood, feral women, chaotic women, women who are bad, women who are complicated. Like, these are the characters that I always want to see, and they nailed it so well. And this movie is so fucking tragic and sad and gross and fucked up, but it's also incredibly beautiful and incredibly well done, and I just love this movie. So, like, I'm so glad I rewatched it, because I love this movie so much more now. Because everyone's like, oh yeah, it's the gross C-section movie. It's like, yes, but, like, it's so much more than that. There's so much more going on here. And I think that's, like on the Wikipedia page, it says that the guy who directed Rec, Kwame Balaguero, told Fangoria, oh god, it was a long time ago, in 2008, that he was going to direct a remake, and it would accentuate the terror of the pregnancy situation more than the gore, which I think, like, completely misses the point of this movie. And I think people are so quick to be like, oh, it's gory. They're like seeing the gore and not understanding that there's, like, a deeper, like, so many other conversations going on here. And I think,
but also, listen, like, pregnancy is pain. Pregnancy is torture. Pregnancy is bloody. Like, even if it wasn't a C-section, we're talking about, like, viscous liquids ejecting from your body.
Like, yeah, it's a lot of women die. A lot of people with uteruses die giving birth. Like, birth is violent. The number of more times than not, when friends and family have given birth, there's been an emergency. Like, it is not, like, even with advanced medical science, birth is traumatic. Mm-hmm. Like, you're still going through pain. Even if you're getting a C-section, you're still, like, all of it. is traumatic. And trying to say that, like, you don't want to talk about gore with pregnancy is like you're grossly not understanding what pregnancy is. Like, and not understanding the violence of pregnancy and birth. Like, God, talking to my pregnant friends and family just, like, about what happens to your body the 9 months while you're pregnant, it is all violence. And so, I don't know, it's just, like, annoying when men are like, like, make comments like that. And you're like, well, like, okay. So, yeah. But that's Inside.
It sure is.
A beautiful movie. That's really gross, but really good. And Beatrice Dalle is my favorite chaos. My chaos goddess, I think, might be what I regard her as. My chaos guide. I will not be doing acid and eating ears, though. I will say. I'm gonna just make that Sherpa stance now.
Sherpa along
she's
the
my
path
guide,
of
but she's my guide, but she's not gonna force me to do anything. I will not be eating dead men's ears. And if I do, I won't tell any of you. I don't want to go to prison. But yeah, I mean, that was Inside, an incredibly beautiful and fucked up movie about motherhood and very complicated feelings of motherhood. If you want to read more about this, I'm going to plug Jed Central. Jen Adams wrote an incredible article about Inside, actually, I think last month, about matriarchy in this and about Sarah, the woman in black, and Sarah's mother, and like the really interesting kind of like triptych the three of them create in this movie. So I'll put that link in the description, patrons, if you're interested in reading that, because it's really good. So give that a read if you're interested in reading more about matriarchy and motherhood in this movie. From a woman who is in fact a mother.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's Inside. I love how we talk longer than these movies actually are. Because they're so rich. But so listeners, you have heard from us about Inside. We want to hear from you. Leave us some comments on the post here. Since this is a Fresh Wounds episode, leave us some comments about your reactions and experiences watching Inside. You can also find us on Twitter, and let us know on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, you know the podcast is on Twitter, but if you want to talk to us there about the movie, it's at Scarred Podcast, as a reminder. And, well, it's hard to do this part, because you're already a patron. What's going on?
I don't know what's happening, but, like, you're pausing and then like fast forwarding, and so I'm having a hard time keeping up with what's happening.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, sorry.
I know I don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's on my end or your end or what, because there's just like you're pausing and then it's like all of a sudden.
Oh, weird. Okay, yeah, everything is going fine on my end, so I don't know.
But yeah, since you are a patron, please, if you haven't given us a review or rating on iTunes, please do that. Make sure you're subscribed so that even if you're not listening to it right away, the episodes download. It really does help us with the algorithms, because everything is based on those day one drops and how many times things are downloaded. So please keep doing that. Thank you so much for supporting us through Patreon.
Yes,
Patreon. We had 2 new additions this year, so thank you both for this. We had 2 new additions this month, so thank you both for signing up at the Fresh Wounds tier. I hope you guys enjoy what we're doing, so thank you.
And if you like what we're doing, also like let people know on social media on our Patreon. We would really appreciate that word of mouth, because that's how people find things on Twitter. So if you're really into these episodes, just a little tweet would be awesome.
So helpful.
No obligation, but just if you are so inclined, that would be great. And as always, thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. And once again, thank you all for listening. We appreciate you so much. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.